Now I get the distinct honor of introducing our second Hall of Fame inductee this morning, Mike Smith. Mike Smith is president of the Finger Lakes Railway, and he is he's an expert at many things, but he is particularly an expert at sharing our industry's story. Going back to when he was a student at Amherst, I'll call him Mike. Mike spent his summers working as a trackman for the Delaware and Hudson Railway and the New York Central Railroad. Though Mike majored in political science, a job as an operating management trainee with Penn Central after graduation set him on a career path that has now lasted over half a century. After Penn Central, Mike worked as a marketing manager at CP in Montreal and later at the Boston and Maine Railroad. At the Boston and Maine, he was vice president of marketing and sales. He was part of the team that brought the railroad out of bankruptcy. In 1990, Mike and others found an opportunity to take over at the time, nearly defunct 118-mile railroad in the Finger Lakes region of New York. With the dogged determination typical of those in the small railroad short-line industry, Mike and his team secured Finger Lakes' transformation into a vital property. Mike has shared with me and with us that part of what helps Finger Lakes continue to flourish is management's focus on customer service, just like we talked about with Katie earlier today, and the accumulated and applied marketing acumen that the team has developed since the very beginning. Though Mike has focused intently on guiding Finger Lakes' growth, he has also recognized the importance and value of working with organizations like the Short Line Association on policies that have been beneficial to the entire short line industry. His sense of responsibility goes far beyond Finger Lakes, and he cares deeply about the success of all of you and the entire industry. In particular, Mike was a very strong proponent of the original 45G short line infrastructure tax credit, which we're still working on to this day. And he advocated persistently for passage of the first tax credit bill back in 2003, 2004, 2005. To this day, literally as of yesterday, he was in a small railroad committee meeting with me. To this day, Mike remains an extremely active participant in the Short Line Association. He's full of ideas. He pushes me, pushes the organization, he pushes our staff, he pushes all of you, he pushes the STB to be better. So with that, please welcome Mike Smith.
I do appreciate the honor, but I think as most people feel when they are so honored, that other people were certainly a factor, the major contributors oftentimes. So very quickly, I'd like to thank a few people, and then if we have the time, just leave you with a little message in terms of perhaps where we should be heading in the future. First, I need to acknowledge Alan Dustin. Dusty, as he was better known, has passed, but he was the president of the Boston and Maine Railway. The B&M was the only railroad that was bankrupt in the 70s that was able to get out of bankruptcy in a traditional manner with, in our particular case, 100 cents on the dollar being paid to the creditors of the railroad. George Betke, he was honored here as a member of the Short Line Hall of Fame a couple of years ago. George and I partnered up to try to find some railroads. He provided the financing, and more importantly, he provided a lot of wisdom in terms of how you go about establishing a railroad from scratch and then sustaining that railroad over time. Thanks also to his team, the Farm Rail team. Judy Petrie, who many of you know, obviously, because of her involvement with the association. But she's got some really good people working for her, and they also work for the Finger Lakes. And they did a tremendous job and are continuing to do a tremendous job. Our lawyer, Eric Hockey, many of you are familiar with Eric. He seems to represent about 90% of the railroads in this country. And he does an excellent job. He's really guided the Finger Lakes through many little issues, always with understanding and certainly strong legal expertise. I'd like to, in particular now, thank a few people on Finger Lakes. Jan McNeil, you all know her, and she's retiring this year, and I just would say to Jan, retirement is overrated. And after a while, you're going to get bored, and you're going to be looking for other things to do. And so I just remind folks that she was very, very effective, and you could probably hire her if you so choose. The team that she put together, commercial team, Bruce Haberfield is key. He's a business development manager and has done a great job in terms of bringing new customers into the railroad. And that's one of the things that as short lines we all do well. We're experts at bringing people onto the railroad and getting people excited about using the railroad. That's one of Bruce's duties. Veronica Fields is our manager of real estate and industrial development. It was one of those areas that we didn't pay an awful lot of attention to early on, but since we've enjoyed the services of Veronica, that particular area has grown immensely in terms of rental income and various other fees that we've been able to charge by paying attention to what was going on our railroad and who was using it either legally or illegally. But anyway, Veronica's done a great job. And then we have a general manager who deserves special recognition, Joanna Armstrong Brooke. And she has a capability of putting the right person in the right position for the right reasons. And some would say that's a skill. I would argue that perhaps it's an art. As part of her team, and one of the really critical members of the team is a guy named Marcus Worden. He's our transportation superintendent and mechanical officer. And Finger Lakes isn't a big railroad, but we are 365 a day railroad. And on Christmas Day, you can always count on Marcus being out bringing coffee to the guys who had to work on Christmas Day. Not a lot of managers do that. Marcus is one of them. After 30 years, the Finger Lakes has some retirees. Two I want to mention, because every railroad needs some good NCOs, the people who in the Army always made a big difference, and in the railroad industry they do as well. They toil under all conditions, and they do it enthusiastically and willingly. And two in particular for Finger Lakes were Craig Holden and Kevin Buckland. They were and remain very active people, but they certainly did a job for Finger Lakes, which is appreciated. And then finally, John Sullivan is a fellow who passed away too soon. He was critical to the development of our railway. And he was Jan's predecessor. And I'd like to remember him today by just mentioning his name. He was a good guy, and we miss him. And then finally, as far as the thanks go, we are an industry that depends upon one another. And the success that Finger Lakes has had is clearly dependent also on our connecting railroads, whether it's the Class 1s or in particular the short lines that we do business with, the people who are here in this room today. And those folks are certainly, your railroads are certainly appreciated and valued as a contributor to the success of Finger Lakes. I wanted to just take time to mention a few things in the departure from this particular speech. I asked people, because I actually put together about 3 messages, 2 really friendly messages, one sort of on the hostile side. I surveyed people and they all said, bring up the hostile one. That's the one that's going to be more interesting. I guess what I finally decided to do was I would just recite the facts, and then you could make a determination as to whether or not this is hostile or this is friendly. I tend to think it's on the friendly side. But basically, railroads have to ask the question and try to develop some answers as to whether we are in a relevant transportation mode. Because there's a lot of things that are going on that would argue that we are no longer relevant. Now, for example, we used to haul everything. As a trackman, I got familiar with some of the material that was being hauled over the road, one of which was manure from the New England racetracks going down into the eastern Pennsylvania mushroom markets. It was an interesting business. And I got pretty familiar with it when a 5-man train crew shoved 62 cars down a 52-car track. And obviously, the empties weren't derailed. It turned out that the manure car was derailed. That was not a pleasant experience It was something that I'd just as soon have avoided, but it did emphasize the fact that we handled everything, including, for example, my grandfather, who had a meat business. He smoked hams, bacon with cobs. He would buy a carload of cobs from the Andersons every year, delivered to a team track in Milton, Vermont. And that business, like the manure business, is all gone. And that just remains a memory. Now, when I started in the business, we had about a 35% market share of the total tons that move in this country. We were the first call that most transportation managers made when they had to move something. We had warehouses that we worked with in partnership to develop new and maintain a current level of business. But that's not the situation today. That's all changed. Today, I think we do border on the point of irrelevance when you start to look at the actual numbers that are involved. For example, our market share today has gone from 35% to 9%. 9%, that's what we have, of all of the tons that move in this country. Now, that will include the guy who mails via FedEx a package from the 14th floor of his office building to a guy on the 35th or floor level. But nonetheless, 9% of the total 11 billion ton transportation market in this country is not good. And it's something that we should be thinking about. Now, for example, when you look at that 9% that we have, and you look at the total transportation market, 90% of the transportation market moves under 500 miles. As an industry, we seem to be fixated on long hauls. And so the Class 1 average long haul now is about 1,000 miles. Now, does it make any sense for us to go out after that 1,000-mile market where we already have a pretty decent market share and ignore the 500-mile market where the business really is? And so I would ask people to start thinking about, how do we compete where the business is? And that's the 500-mile market. The other thing that's important to recognize is that, and it's being ignored, I think, in the current merger discussions, is that the emphasis is on east-west business. But that's not where the business is. The business in this country is basically north-south. So we're going through the whole procedures of mergers, et cetera, and all of the arguments that will be presented pro and con on that, but we're ignoring the bigger markets. The bigger markets are north-south. And we aren't doing particularly well in those markets. And what has to also be considered is the fact that most of the north-south markets are single-line hauls. So all of the problems that everyone talks about on the east-west business because of interchanges does not appear to be a problem north-south. But nonetheless, our market share is abysmal, and we aren't doing what we need to do in order to capture that particular market. Now, the way we do it is equipment, service, and rates. You've all heard it before, and there's lots of details about that. And keeping myself limited as far as the time, I won't go into it. But just remember that equipment is important, service is critically important, and the problem when you're of the age I am, and you've been in the business as long as I've been, you start reflecting on the type of service that we used to have, and it's not there any longer. It's worse, much worse. And that's something that we ought to be also embarrassed by, and one thing that we need to consider, all of us, as we are moving forward. And then, of course, there's the rate issue, which we have to be very careful in terms of what we talk about. But I think we can all agree that we have a rate problem. Many of the businesses that you guys are competing for, that Finger Lakes is competing for, we can't get because of a rate issue. And that's something that we're going to have to try to figure out the path forward in order to accomplish something better in that particular area. So concluding, I would just say that this business has a huge opportunity. When you are 9%, you should never have a recession. You should never be cautiously optimistic, as some leaders in our business would say, about the upcoming year or the upcoming 5 years. when you were at 9% and you were at 35% 50 years ago, you've got no place to go but up. And the key thing is that in this crowd here are the ideas, the imaginations, the dedication to getting things done that can help us get back into the major markets and return this industry to relevancy. So thank you very much for this particular honor. And I do appreciate it. It came as a complete surprise. And while I think that the judgment of the whoever determined that the winner would be, at least in my case, perhaps should be called into question. But it's certainly something that is greatly appreciated. And thank you all, and thank you all for the help that you've given Finger Lakes over the years in terms of working with our little company. So thank you.